What's up, guys? Welcome to a new video. So this is part 2 of the astrology of commitment issues. So if you didn't see part 1, go see that first. I basically have combined these two. These are not in chronological order. So basically, commitment issues, there's different elements or placements you can have in your natal chart, or that you can see in, maybe like an ex or someone in your life's natal chart that can lead to having issues with commitment and relationships. So basically, let's roll the intro really quickly, and then let's get into what that means, and then go into the different placements. Okay, what's up, guys? Welcome. So first of all, really briefly, I explained this in part 1, but commitment issues from a psychological perspective come when deeper emotional conflict between the desire, when there's a deeper emotional conflict between the desire for connection and the fear of what that connection might bring, right? So it can be about control over your time, your freedom, your sense of self. There can be so much. There can be a sense of FOMO, fear of missing out, like what might my life be like if I wasn't in this relationship, etc. And there's different placements that are more apt to having commitment issues, right? Now, of course, someone might think, okay, well, this is about cheating. Not necessarily, guys. And there's no, just because someone has all these placements doesn't mean that they're not a loyal person. They can't be that. It's not about loyalty. This is about, that's more something that's a value that comes from the soul in a sense, right? But there can be different positions that make it more difficult. So let's dive into those. So like I said, if you haven't seen part 1, pause this right now, go back to my Cosmo sessions and go watch part 1. But, as I said, at the end of part 1, there's a lot that I didn't go into in part 1. So let's start with Pluto in the 7th, or Pluto in hard aspect to Venus. Basically, Pluto in hard aspect, and by the way, hard aspect, I mean square, opposition, quincunx, and even conjunction, although conjunction is kind of different, but in this case, yes. So Pluto in the 7th house, or in hard aspect to Venus, I would know I have Pluto square Venus. It adds, regardless of your chart, it adds a very scorpionic layer a layer of scorpionic intensity to a relationship, especially when you're younger. There can be a level, kind of a power dynamics that can be in relationships, fear of abandonment, and someone who essentially meets their shadow, right, in relationships. So they can be very, very extreme in this area of life, and kind of put everything into that. People with these placements, they tend to crave deep and very transformational relationships, right? So when they have a level of childhood trauma or unresolved trauma from past lives or from whenever, what happens with a Pluto square Venus is that they meet that trauma, that shadow, in the relationship. And same with Pluto in the 7th house. So a lot of times there's a lot of, it's very psychologically, it's very interesting on a psychological level what happens here, right? Because imagine the level of projection that can come when you have, let's say, like unresolved issues with your mom or your dad or something else, right? And then you take it out. It all, like, you think that it hasn't affected you. Let's say it's a divorce, right? You think it hasn't affected you, and then you have a relationship, a divorce, or like, one parent left or something, and you think you've gone past it, and then you have a relationship, and then all of that comes flooding out, right? So that's very Pluto, Venus, or Pluto 7th house, more Pluto Venus. But so there can be a fear of this can be linked to a fear of abandonment that can get projected onto a relationship, right? Because relationships can become the area where one meets their shadow, and it can be kind of scary. So one might, in this type of relationship, self-sabotage, kind of be in and out based on what they're experiencing, in the sense of, like, if this is too much, right? Now with that said, long term, this can be very, very good. This is kind of good. If you watch part 1, you saw that there's some placements that I was explaining that these are like very more of like the FOMO, I'm talking like the Sag moon, Gemini moon, the Uranus ones. These are very different than like the Pluto and the Saturn ones, right? But with Pluto in the seventh house, relationships are always about deep internal changes, right? So it's never easy. And it can lead to like power struggles, control, jealousy, fear, betrayal, manipulation, all that kind of low vibe Scorpio stuff. So the hard aspects between Pluto and Venus, mixed, plus all these places, they can create this kind of push and pull dynamic in love, right? So the person can be extremely drawn to, but also afraid of the emotional intensity of a relationship, which could, be why I would have in this category of potential for commitment issues. So commitment might feel very risky. So it's like true commitment, right? Could be in a sense like linked to like losing control or losing power or losing, it can be very difficult for people with these placements to allow that to kind of exist, right? So leaning into it is very, very brave. It takes a lot of courage, especially when young. Embracing vulnerability and all that is kind of the key here. But I think like and I'll always say this, like with Pluto hard aspect Venus or Pluto, in the seventh house, especially Pluto hard aspect Venus, you can always tell how far someone has gone with their spiritual growth or their growth in general based on their partners, because either of these placements will tend to attract very dark partners, very toxic partners, very low vibe Plutonian partners, right? Like it could be like a ton of drama, it could be criminals, it could be just like very like manipulative, psychologically manipulative, energetically vampiric people. And then as they get older and they gain more self-love, Venus is actually self-love, they start to not be down for that anymore. Like I don't really like to talk too much about myself here, but I have Pluto square Venus, and that's totally been my experience. And I've noticed how things I was down for, I was okay with at 18 or 20 or 21. Like I wouldn't even like give right? Like it wouldn't even like be. It would be like no fun, like zero. Not giving any of that shit. Not dealing with any of that shit. So yeah, okay. Next is Mars. So Mars in Aquarius, Gemini or Sag. Mars in Aquarius is very hard to pin down. It's kind of hard to know what makes a Mars in Aquarius person tick. But one thing that they do need is freedom. All three of these, right, are mutable signs, or two of them are. These are the three most freedom-loving signs. So Mars, the planet of action, the planet of how we move, our assertiveness function. You can imagine that having Mars in any of these three, Gemini and Sagittarius, very curious, very much about experimenting, very much about traveling, very much about moving around the world from this to that. It's about sequence. It's about trial and error. It's about getting a lot of experience out of life. So you can imagine how if someone's has Mars in one of these placements, that they have a drive to experience a lot. So then the question becomes, well, if they're in a relationship that is very traditional or holds them back from doing that very thing, are they gonna truly be okay in their nature to commit to that relationship? I mean, it's not about demonizing these placements, right? Like, I have Mars in Aquarius myself, right? It's different than like Mars and Gemini and Sag are, I would say, are even more like on that experimental side. Aquarius is very much about like, I need to move in a way that's authentic to myself. I need to move in a way that's independent, right? I need to move in a way that's for the good of the people, for the good of society. And a lot of like the most creative people have Mars in Aquarius. That's something I've noticed. I'm not saying that because of me, if anyone's thinking that. It's just a random thing I've noticed looking at really creative celebrities charts. I've seen a lot of like people who have their only Aquarius planet is Mars. I'm like, damn, that's interesting, So that's got to be what gives that person, because it's like I don't see that much else in their chart besides some aspects. I can't think of who I'm thinking of right now. By the way, there's been a few of them. I look up a lot of charts, a lot. And I see a lot with clients, people in my life. I mean, I have so many charts in my head, it's fucking ridiculous. I wish I could remember like exactly which one's who, but one day. So anyways, let's break these down. So basically, yeah, so commitment doesn't always come easy. So Mars in Aqua, as I said, prioritizes individuality and often rejects that more traditional relationship role. And they want something unconventional. They need their personal space because for them, it's like, I'm the inventor. I'm the person that's trying to like see and move through life in a strategic, not strategic, strategic, but in a way where I'm seeing ahead of time. I'm seeing the future. I am understanding. And Sag also, right? It's like, I want to understand the zeitgeist. I want to understand what's happening, you know, because I want to help people, but I also want to help myself. I want to set myself up for a life where I'm learning about who I am, right? That's one of the biggest points of life, is to know who you are and know who you're not. So when you're in a very repressed, restrictive relationship that's based on tradition, you can imagine like for someone who has, you know, one of these placements, it'd be very difficult. So also with personal space, right? They needed personal space. So they may, you know, there could be like a real, with all these, you know, with Aquarius, we're talking about that first, like they need that mental / intellectual stimulation, right? They really, like, I think for all these in love, they need someone who they can like, who's very intelligent or who's very like, because people with this tend to be very intelligent, right? Obviously, depending on the aspects and just a lot more than just that. But there's an open-mindedness here, typically. So you don't want to be with someone who's just very closed-minded and like just like never questioning anything. I know people probably just heard that and are thinking like, well, okay, I can think of like my mom or this person in my life or that person, this person, that person who is not like this at all, and they have this placement. Well, guys, guess what? That's called conditioning. Mars in Gemini is more playful with relationships. They need to be best friends with their lovers. You know, there's that mental stimulation is super important. And yeah, it's like they need really, really good communication, and they're not the best with consistency in the sense that they, like I said, it's just like what I said last week, or with the last video with the moon. Last week I said it an hour ago. With the moon Gemini, right? It's like, you know, there's that need for experience, right? And if you're being held back, now of course we have different periods in life, but yeah, Mars and Gemini, they want to kind of be little journalists through life. You know, they want to collect a lot of life data. Okay, Sagittarius Mars is the adventurer, it's the gypsy, it's the person who is super idealistic. They're constantly desiring more growth, more adventure. So they might like all these hide from relationships that are too predictable, and they need someone who has that, you know, that same vision for adventure and for freedom, and might be able. I think all three of these they do well with someone who they can have conversations that are outside the mainstream. Like I always talk about sleeping in different bedrooms, having energetic breaks. You know, the idea of like, okay, like I know that I don't want to be the kind of person who just gets in a relationship and loses everything I had going, loses my life, loses. It's not even about like, you have a mission in life, right? And it's different for everyone. And people come to different conclusions at different times, but depending on where you're at, it's like you might feel like there's way more exploring needed intuitively. I said this last video, like you could have everything you need, you can have everything you could possibly desire in life. Like I actually had a client with this lately, not too long ago, and you know, explaining to me like how on the external, like everyone would think that what she has is like perfect, right? But that there's just that feeling of there's just something that isn't there. There's just something that's like off, right? So next we have the South Node in the 7th and the South Node in the 1st. So first, let's do South Node in the 7th. So having your South Node in the 7th house, there's a karmic tendency to over-prioritize relationships, right? So South Node in the 7th or in Libra, So the karmic lesson, obviously there's way more. You have to get a birth chart at justineastrology.com, live or recorded, to really like see how it works with everything in your chart. But the karmic lesson, or one of them, is about focusing more on the self, right? North Node in the first house, Aries energy. But people with this, they often feel like their safe place is often being drawn to more, to relationships to kind of complete them, right? To lose themselves in them, and as a way of kind of avoiding personal growth. So a lot of people with this, they need to learn to balance partnerships with individuation. And the reason, hold on. So it's interesting. You might be thinking like, okay, well, why would this be commitment issues? This is like kind of like a wild card, because it's like, it's these people on a karmic level often get pushed in ways where it's like, are you going to have your own back, or are you just going to kind of give in to this relationship, right? And that's what I'm talking about. They're not people who, they can actually be like the opposite of what this whole post is about. Like South Node in the first house would be more in that, but like it's still really important to have that in there, because a lot of times there is different pain and issues that can come up with South Node in the 7th house and in Libra, especially if one's resisting that move towards Aries. And that can then lead to, because they're so used to like the relationship defining them, things can come up that can kind of like be very toxic, and then that can, it's not that these people are not meant to be in relationships, right? Because there is a lot of been there, done that. It's that they're meant to find, to be okay with being themselves, right? Or with being independent. But yeah, that's a little bit of an odd one. I forget why I had that in there, to be honest. But I mean, it's worth talking about. But yeah, South Node in the first house is the big one. So obviously, South Node in the first house means that it's someone who's naturally very independent, very self-focused. So the idea of compromising or being in a relationship can be very, very unnatural. And I'm going to add South Node in the 12th house to this too. So yeah, basically people with this can kind of, they're used to doing their own thing, right? And they're used to relying on themselves. And like the whole idea of compromise or emotional vulnerability, that can feel like a threat to their freedom. So they may crave connection, but then pull back when it feels like their independence is at risk. You know what I'm saying? So the karmic tendency of being alone makes it feel like it's not such a big deal to not be in any committed relationships, right? Although the universe will kind of push them to go in that direction. They'll be rewarded when they do take that risk. So now really quickly, South Node in the 12th house. I didn't have that one like prepared, but like, let's talk about it a little bit. So South Node in the 12th house, people like myself have that. Isolation in the psychic spiritual realms can be we're very used to that, right? So, while some people might really, really struggle with being alone, like really, really struggle with like the whole idea of just like being in your own energy, being in a period of isolation, right? Well, for South Node in the 12th house, it can be exactly that. So let's say that they're in a relationship, and things, whatever, like things don't necessarily go how they want. Well, they are so cool, and this actually can go like this can be kind of. Let me think for a second. Anyone who has a chart that's like very introverted, like kind of 7 numerology type energy, they can kind of fall into a place where it's like, okay, well, I'm cool with being alone, So that whole isolating part of them, that part of them that's used to that, that's happy in that, because there's no risk. It's kind of reminding me of like kind of the fear that Cancer. Basically, with low vibe water, just in general, right? Especially, I'm not gonna say any gender. I was gonna say especially with men, but like, nah, it can kind of go either way. Yeah, maybe men it's more prevalent to isolate because, but this could be low vibe water, or just even like Capricorn moon can do this a lot too, or like Saturn, different positions. This is more of like a qualitative entry. Basically, when you're okay with isolating, right? When you're cool with that, when you're kind of like the crab, like Cancer. Think about Cancer. It's like the crab that once they're hurt, they crawl back in their shell, and they don't like once they've trusted and they've been hurt, they crawl in their shell and they never trust again, right? That whole metaphor. So, it's like that, it's like that, and it can show up. That can show up in a lot of different ways with. A lot of different placements, right? So I've seen this so much, right? And it's not something that's really, it's very, very implicit, right? It's not something that's very explicit, like in the sense that it's not really talked about, but it's something I notice where I see someone who I know for a fact was like very in love at one point and gave their all and like really kind of like got screwed over in a romantic context. And then I see them down the line and I can tell that they're just like something in them, whether they're conscious of it or not, is just not open. Even like so many years later, like it's like they're just not willing to enter relationships. And what they'll do sometimes is they'll I said this last video, they'll self-sabotage, right? Like even if like, so I can think of one example of someone I know who has this exact way where someone really liked them, and because that someone liked them, they downgraded that person. It's that whole thing I said last video, which is like, oh, you like me, then you must be a piece of shit. Or like, so there's so many defense mechanisms when you've been hurt. So this can be water, this could be a more psychological type of something that can apply to a lot of different placements, and it's maybe more based on healing in general, but I think it can really show up with very emotional people in the sense of people, okay, someone who's used to isolation. That's why I said like South Node 12th house, because like that's like being used to being in your own energy, right? Or like a very 12th house person, right? Or like a very 8th house person, very Piscean person, right? It's like a lot of people like that are naturally introverted. They're naturally isolators. So there's this whole thing, right? Like when you really, really value your alone time or your time where it's just you, you're not going to put up with BS. When you hate being alone, and I made a video about this a while ago, and you rate at a scale of 1 to 10 your time alone as like a 3 out of 10, then someone that's a 4 out of 10 or a 4.5 out of 10, not in looks, this is just like in terms of, this is just an analogy, right? When you rate your time alone, where it's just you with you, as horrible, you hate being alone, then you're gonna accept someone that's still shit, because anything is better than being alone. But when you actually like being alone in a healthy way, like let's say it's like a 9, even if it's a 10 out of 10, or like an 8 or 9 out of 10, like, no one's perfect, right? So that's the balance. Like you might be in the place where it's like you like being alone too much, but it's more of a defense mechanism. You're not actually happy, right? So when anyone comes along, like no one's as good as like your alone time, right? But I think a healthy level is kind of in between those, where it's like you really do love it. You accept being alone, you like it, you see kind of how there's good and bad in both sides, right? There's good in being in a relationship, and there's good in being just in your own energy, and God really decides a lot of that. That's my opinion, right? So you have people who are so obsessed, and like I said earlier, a lot of that is a defense mechanism of being just in their own energy and so afraid of what happens when they let someone else in, that what happens? They never let someone else in. Even if someone who's super good for them comes, it's like, they might have social anxiety, they might be awkward in the sense of like not really, or having issues with vulnerability, issues with just being close one-on-one with someone. You know what I mean? There's so many different potentials. And there's this kind of like a cocoon analogy. I think that Buddhists, or I can't remember who, like, I think it's a Buddhist psychology thing, right? The whole idea of the cocoon, right? Where it's like, that's your safe spot. And I think there's a lot of greatness to it. I think in life we should go through phases of like being in our cocoon and then going, like kind of like doing, there can be a process sometimes that is on a spiritual, emotional level that we have to be alone for, or that's better to kind of be more isolated, like Neptune transits, for example. But the question is, like, everything is about extremes. So if you're someone who just stays in that, and once you have that period that's introverted, and then when that has kind of run its course, you still stay in that, then there's a problem. Life is about balancing the two, right? So that's kind of what I would say about that. What else? Of course, like commitment issues in that context, yeah, like I already explained how they would come up, right? Like, and I think a lot of times it can come up as like that thought of like, I'm not good enough for this person. So low vibe Earth is like the perfectionism, right? And that could be that person who's like, I'll never be good enough for that, for this person, right? Like, or like they're so self-judgmental, right? Let's say like a low vibe Mars and Virgo, a low vibe, lots of like difficult Saturn aspects, whatever, right? Different Earth placements, Capricorn, Virgo, Taurus. Sorry if I keep saying I'm just winging this. They can sometimes think that other people are better than them, when in fact it's the opposite. They can think that everyone else has everything all figured out, and just really downgrade themselves because they have such good observation skills. You know what I mean? They have such good observation skills that if you're someone who sees every detail, like Mars and Virgo is, right? Physically, you see everything. You see all your imperfections. So until you've learned self-compassion, until you've learned self-acceptance, what I've seen happen with a lot of people, like who have who use that in the low vibe, have that and are more in the low vibe of it, is that they tend to, like, imagine you're hanging out with someone and it's like you're just in your flow state and they're like, oh, you got a little fat in your face, or just a random thing like that. Or just something that you haven't even thought about because you don't care. That's like what I'm talking about, something like that. And then it's like, oh, okay. I'm just chilling. I'm just flowing. I'm just trying to, live. So that would be an example. And I think that like when we relate this to love, low vibe Earth could be, that lack of self-esteem, thinking that there's just something wrong, like that because they're able to see so much and observe so much and have such that grounded energy where they can like I said, like observe so much that other people don't have the imperfections that they see in themselves, so that it can kind of create some shame or some feelings of like, oh damn, like I'm messed up, right? And that's all about the perfectionism. So the cure to that, as I said before, is self-love and self-acceptance and just really mindfulness and perspective, perspective, really getting to know people and opening up vulnerability. That's another thing, is that the low vibe Earth can really fear that if I open up, if I truly show all my colors, people are going to hate me or are going to think I'm so weird. A lot of shame can come from that. So yeah, low vibe or unhealed earth, whatever you want to call it. 5th and 7th house dynamic / interplay. So the balance between the 5th and the 7th houses is one of the most important factors in understanding this whole commitment issues in a chart. The 5th house is all about romance, right? And that first stage of when you meet someone, the pink cloud period, blah, blah, blah. And the 7th house represents the actual partnership and the long-term commitment. So it's like past that pink cloud stage, right? Which is more of the 5th house. So when someone has a lot of 5th house energy, whether it's planetary placements or the ruler of the 7th being in the 5th, or even just a lot of Leo placements in general, or just a lot going on in that 5th, they tend to prioritize the excitement and passion of romance over the actual structure and long-term commitment. Now, obviously, this is difficult. This can be very different if like your 5th house is very serious, like Capricorn or something, right? But yeah, still, it's just something that's important to know about. And yeah, so there can be a difficulty with transitioning from the thrill of new love to this, to that stage of commitment. Because the 5th house is very much about that joy and freedom, but less about that responsibility. So yeah, I just want to kind of have that one in there. I'm trying to think what else I could say. Yeah, just keep that in mind when you're seeing charts. Like if you see a 5th house, but once again, it doesn't this is why you should, if you don't fully know your chart, get a reading. Even if you know it, get a reading by me. I promise it'll be the best investment. It's always really good to hear someone else that doesn't know anything about you just break you down in a way, right? So the ruler of the 7th in the 12th house. Let me write that down. So basically, okay, so this is when the ruler of the 7th house is in the 12th, relationships can be very, very, so for example, let's say you have, let's say that you're a Sag, you're a Gemini rising, so you're the 7th house, your descendant is Sag, which is ruled by Jupiter, and your Jupiter is in the 12th house, being example, right? So, yeah, there can be a very hidden karmic, hard to pin down quality to relationships. It can show up as secret relationships, even unavailable partners, or just feeling like there's this kind of out of reach quality to love, I guess. So I think that there can be, a fear of fully showing up authentically and really being one's true, full self in relationships when people who have this. And they can sometimes feel as if full commitment could expose something too vulnerable about them. It can feel too risky, so they can shy away from that, right? Like I said, it can be very karmic, can be very, very, very secretive, very odd. Same thing with a Venus in the 12th house or something like that. Can create a lot of really interesting, hidden, romantic kind of stuff that's going on. If you know someone with Venus in the 12th, ask them about their love life if they're close to you, and just let them explain to you some of their stories. It's usually pretty interesting. A big part of this one is just letting go, and just trusting God, trusting the divine. Yeah, I've seen so many secret relationships of real life examples of people with this secret relationships, and yeah, just a ton of interesting things. And same with Venus in the 12th. I'm not gonna put Venus in the 12th in this list because it's made for a different list, right? And it's just too broad to have on this type of list. Okay, so Moon square / opposite Venus. So this is a very interesting one. basically when this happens, and it could be quincunx also, emotional needs and romantic desires tend to be at odds with one another. So the person may desire true, deep emotional intimacy and vulnerability, but then also struggle to have that align with their love language or their relationship style, right? So I've seen this lead to all types of intimacy issues, and sometimes it's very up and down, or it can be like a very, very up and down relationship style. I've seen some correlation also with this, with men who have this, who have mama issues like moon square Venus. And yeah, so it can create a lot of inner conflict around relationships where they might feel unsatisfied no matter how much effort they put into love. So there can be this like swinging back and forth between needing security and moving towards pleasure. So it can obviously make commitment very difficult, right? And have them always questioning if they are being true to themselves and why they really, what they really want. And yeah, so the best way to deal with this is to be able to find a balance between these two parts of the self. The lesson is that love doesn't have to be an either or situation. It can be both. Yeah, that one's interesting. So let me know in the comments if you guys have any of these, of course, or if you guys have observed these. It's always the info I like to see. Next, we got Venus in Aquarius. So here's Venus in Aquarius or Gemini. These are two Venus signs that do not do well with rules and love. Venus in Aquarius, we are all about nonconformity. We aren't gonna like be attracted to like what's like who society tells us to be attracted to, and we're not gonna be wanting the type of relationships that society tells us we should have. So freedom is the most important thing. We need our space, like we're gonna, like I said in the past video, we're gonna value our friends just as much as relationships. So you have some people who are in relationships, and something I struggle with actually, not me, but I have really close friends who they get in relationships, and it's like they just kind of, that's all that matters to them, right? And me being Venus, Mars, and Aquarius, I could never, I think one of the things, because Venus is what you value, right? So Venus and Aquarius, you value your friends, right? Value your community. So the last thing you want is to be in a relationship with someone that restricts your ability to expand and to have friends, and like kind of controlling you in that way. Oh, don't be friends with this person, don't be friends with that person, or someone. So like a lot of times Venus and Aquarius like will be better with partners who, obviously the whole chart is very, 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 it matters a lot, but like it doesn't mean that they can't be private people. Like I'm very private myself. That's like the more Scorpionic or 8th house element of my chart. But like there's that desire to like, okay, like they tend to be really, really good socially, Venus and Aquarius, and have like lots of friends, right? So they wouldn't want to be with someone who's like holding that, like who might be like even if it's like the best person in the world, it could be kind of difficult to be with them if they're someone like, let's say myself, right? Like I don't like to, I'm trying not to talk about myself, but like hypothetically, if I was in a relationship where as an astrologer, obviously I work, there's a lot, it's mostly women that follow me that as of 2025, I'd say like what percentage of people into astrology are women. So that's a majority, right? So obviously I'm going to have, friends that are women. So having a girlfriend, I don't have a girlfriend right now, by the way, but having one that would say, oh, don't be friends with her, don't be friends with her, like that would be like very against what that'd be an example of what I'm saying, right? Because it's like that's keeping me away from potential, friendship, community, and kind of the whole idea of Aquarius, right? Which is like making the world a better place, humanitarianism, etc. So, feeling boxed in any way, there's usually going to be a revolution. They'll usually leave. Because like the whole Venus and Aquarius is like associating being tied down with losing independence and individuality, right? So it is very common to have a very non-traditional relationship, and not really interested in doing what you're supposed to do, right? So with Venus in Gemini, Venus in Gemini needs relationships that have curiosity, where like they're very curious, right? So like they get there's all this bad rep that Venus and Gemini gets. Oh my God, they're the sluts of the zodiac. No, they're just curious people who can be very flirtatious at times, but it's like really they crave excitement. They want constant. They want to experience so much in life. So they can be people at some point in their life that date a lot of people. Doesn't mean they're sleeping with all of them. So it's like I guess like people can kind of talk shit about them sometimes because it's like they can lose interest like quite quickly. But the truth is that they just need a specific type of person. Someone who really gets them, someone who they can kind of spread their wings with. And Gemini rules communication. It rules so it's that mental faculty, right? So if they don't have someone who they feel like they can bounce ideas off of and have long conversations, and who gives them like a life that's more fun, like, yes, it's not to say that they don't want someone like that's everyone wants to have someone that grounds them in a way, right? But like if it's someone who's just like not willing to kind of adapt and not willing to grow and to kind of like try new things, like that can get really bored. They can get bored really fast. Like being forced into a version of themselves that they're simply not is like, not good. So I would say for both of these, like there's that potential to really detach emotionally when things feel too routine. So they need to be able to breathe, right? And also laugh. I forgot about that one. They need to be able to laugh. Like they need to be able to like take a step back. So that's like sometimes people with these placements like struggle with people who are very, it's not, okay, I don't want to make like blanket statements, but like sometimes people who bring too much emotional drama, which is good for some people. I don't want to say too much. Like when there's a level of like sometimes, they like things to be light, and the same thing you could say with Sagittarius. I'm going to add Sag in here, because Sagittarius also is about experience as well, right? So Venus and Sagittarius, obviously, like Venus and Sagittarius will tend to like people from different cultures and, where they feel like they can grow, with that person, right? They feel like they can learn a lot with that person, and where that person kind of can add to their worldview in some type of way. That's why a lot of them are more attracted to people who come from either different cultures or different backgrounds or whatever, right? Just where they can have like a kind of more of a philosophical bond. But yeah, so it doesn't mean that none of these people want something, just want something casual or can't commit. It's just that they need to feel like they're individuating, right? That they're still themselves, as opposed to like certain couples or love languages where the two people are essentially like blending together, becoming one person. And like, sometimes you have like the more dominant person who, almost like swallows. I've seen it in my own family, actually, extended family. Like just, it's very sad to see someone kind of have their whole being just swallowed by the other person. Okay, so Moon in the 11th house. So 3 more. I'm on a marathon. So the Moon in the 11th house feels very safe in friendships or group connections, but they can sometimes find those one-on-one relationships a bit suffocating. So of course it depends on the entire chart with this one, right? And everything I've listed, but emotional security here usually comes from belonging to a community, not just one person. So if they're in a very suffocating relationship where that person is trying to it's difficult. But yeah, so this placement can definitely make someone a little bit more emotionally detached, or hesitant to kind of commit if they think that it'll limit their freedom or connection to their wider friend network or community. So yeah, they may prioritize their friendships or community/friends over romantic relationships, and they might see love as something that should fit seamlessly into their larger goals or life path. And they need a partner who understands that their need for independence like, or who, I guess, like, yeah, who, let me re-say that. They need a partner who understands that need that they have for independence and for being part of the community and kind of their larger goals, and who kind of fits seamlessly into their overall life direction, right? And ideals that they have. A lot of times it's very humanitarian. So Neptune in hard aspect to Venus / the moon. So second from the last one. So the big one, right? So when Neptune is in hard aspect to Venus or the moon, I kind of talked about this a little bit, but did I? I forget. It creates kind of that deep yearning for a perfect idealized love, right? And that person can like dream of a perfect partner, you know, like that can come from like, you know, a romantic Hollywood movie they saw when they were 13 and they just had it stuck in their mind, like, oh, this is, you know, someone that I need to be with, or like, you know, this is exactly how my life. I've had experiences. I've known people where like they had a certain image of like in person where they were not going to accept them, like they were not going to accept anything else, and there's no possibility of them being happy in their life if they didn't have this exact ending with this exact person. And it's like you're just saying, I mean, like it's just sad because it's like, well, if that person doesn't like you, then you're just saying you're just basically saying that you're going to be unhappy, right? But I've seen that with yeah, and also Neptune in her aspect to Venus or the Moon. And this could also show up as like Venus and Pisces, like when it's, you know, when Venus and Pisces is obviously like not usually looked at in a negative way, but I've seen it be like really terrible when it's, you know, I have a crazy example of this, Venus and Pisces, but then he also had Neptune in the 7th house. If you guys know me, you guys know what story I'm talking about. My former best friend who basically got brainwashed by his wife and just stopped talking to everyone in his life. It's really sad. And became a Jehovah's Witness. But yeah, so basically what can happen is that the person can just like start to think like, you know, especially like with the whole like soulmate, twin flame. I'm not saying shit about that. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Like I'm just saying that like that stuff can be very dangerous for people who have these types of placements because they can invite energy vampires that can then start to talk to them in that type of love language of like, oh, you know, they start to know like, okay, well, this person believes in soulmates. This person's like, I've seen this with someone I know. I'm not going to mention names, but I've seen like someone who, I mean, I would say like from the surface level seems kind of more, I was going to say demonic. Just like, you know, like the classic, is it covert narcissist? I don't even know the words, guys. I should. I do know. Why did I say I don't know? I'm literally I'm not a psychologist, but I have 2 masters in psychology. But, you know, the person who memorizes like what that, usually it's the man, right? Who figures out, okay, how does this woman think? You know, oh, she believes in past life. She believes in soulmates and twin flames. Okay, well, I'm gonna just play into that role. And then once he gets what he wants, then his real self comes out. And I can see this, and it sucks when you see it, but like you're not really in a place where you're allowed to really say anything. I've had a recent experience of that sort, which is not for sure decided. I wish the best for them. I hope I'm wrong. But yeah, like it's just when you have that Neptunian energy in love, yeah, you sometimes need to have like a freaking like triple Capricorn friend who's like, hey, get your fucking head out of the gutter, you know, like be real. So yeah, being able to reconcile this vision of this Hollywood kind of movie, Disney, whatever vision with reality. So romanticizing partners, like being over idealizing them, projecting your fantasies onto them based on like their potential of like what you like, how you see them and how they could be. I know a lot of people watching this can kind of feel what I'm saying, like projecting like, yeah, what your ideal of them is onto them, right? As opposed to who they really are, and overlooking their shortcomings, right? Because you're not looking at them, you're looking at them with pink colored glasses. And yeah, just like that. You have this like fantasy of love, life, love situation, whatever you want to call it. You have this fantasy, and you just take that person, whoever they are, and just like as long as they check a few boxes, boom, then they're that person, right? So, and then there's that great disillusionment that comes when these people don't live up to the grand expectations. Because as you know, when you put anyone on a pedestal, it sucks. I've been there several times, and I know a lot of people watching have been there. I mean, I don't know. Does anyone like being put on a pedestal? I mean, to me, I feel like being put on a pedestal is like someone trying to find God in another human. And I just feel like it's just really, it sucks because it's like it's just so much pressure, and it feels like you can't breathe, you know? It feels like, I don't know. So, yeah, so what can happen here is it can create a cycle of chasing the perfect relationship while avoiding real emotional intimacy that may come their way and actually be good for them. So they can, like, for example, like reject someone that comes along that doesn't fit that perfect like ideal they have in their head, even if that person is actually good for them and a more, let's call it like a more realistic, like grounded person, but maybe lacks that like something, I don't know. So it's a difficult one, but it can also be very beautiful, especially when it gets, hard. I always say hard aspects are meant to turn into assets. But yeah, Neptune hard aspect to the moon brings a very similar energy to the Venus, but with a focus on emotional needs. So the struggle is really to ground one's feelings. And there's a tendency for confusion, escapism, and all like those two things to exist in relationships. And basically everything I said before applies to both. So yeah. It's not super easy or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? Okay, last one. So Chiron in the 7th house / in hard aspect to Venus or the moon. So basically, this brings very deep wounds around relationships and emotional intimacy. Chiron, the wounded healer, that's, in the 7th house, there's pain, there's wounds in that area of life and relationships, right? And past romantic experiences can bring a deep fear of vulnerability and a feeling of being disempowered in relationships. So whether this comes from this lifetime or past lives, whatever happened left, this feeling of rejection or unworthiness of love. So with this, there's a tendency to seek healing through relationships, right? And often attracting relationships that trigger old wounds, which is never easy, but it's part of it, right? So while painful, these experiences are meant to kind of help them grow and understand their own value. So then with the hard Chiron aspects of Venus and the moon, they can definitely amplify this pain, right? It can lead to a fear of opening up fully in love or feeling like that they're too much emotionally, right? So really the path to healing lies in embracing your own self-worth and learning that relationships don't define your value and that all relationships and love is just a reflection of what's happening within the self, So sometimes you need to take time for yourself yeah, just learning boundaries obviously is like as important as it gets. And sometimes it's those periods where you're just like accepting, because a lot of these placements, right? Some of these placements, I mean, it does require just being okay with being single, if that makes sense, which doesn't sound like something so amazing, but when you are cool with like I probably won't be single forever, but like if I am, it's not the end of the world. It opens up a bunch of freedom compared to like, I need to be in a relationship. I need to have this happen at this time or else like I'm worthless, because you have to imagine that God has a plan for you, and that for most people, in my vision, the more important relationships are very fated when they start. And some people are not meant to have them, or they're meant to have them at very specific times because that's their karmic tendencies to always rely on them. So just like enjoy the great mystery of life. Don't try to, just understand how little you understand, and understand that, God is going to do what God's going to do. So anyways, that's it. Thank you so much, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed part 1 and part 2 of this, and I'll be back soon. Subscribe, like, all that stuff, and let me know if you want to get a reading, natal, live or recorded. And then just go on jesseannisonastrology.com and send me an email if you have any questions, or better yet, Instagram at jesseannisonastro. Check me out there. Send me a message if I don't answer. If it doesn't go through, just leave a comment on my page saying I sent you a DM. And yeah. All right. Thank you guys. Later. Ciao.